Today I'm going to show you how to make marshmallows the way they were originally made, from the roots of the marshmallow plant. Marshmallow is a plant from the Malvaceae family, or the mallow family, and this family contains a lot of other plants that you're probably familiar with, such as cacao, cotton, okra, and hibiscus. The name marshmallow actually comes from the fact that this is a mallow that prefers to live in marshes. So across its native ranges of Europe, Western Asia, and North Africa, you will find this plant growing in marshy or wet areas. Marshmallow grows pretty readily from seed, and I'll link where I got my seeds down below, but there are several different companies that you could get them from. If you're starting from seed though, you're going to have to wait 2 years to harvest your marshmallow root. This is a perennial plant and it needs time to get established before you start harvesting its roots, which are where it gets all of its nutrients, right? So right now it is the end of their second year of growth. It is the fall and the foliage has pretty much fully died back. So now it is time to harvest the roots. So first I'm going to come in here and actually cut back all of the dead foliage just to get it out of the way. Next, I'm going to start gently digging around the crown of the plant. The crown is that point where the roots and the stems meet, and it should be fairly large at this point. You can see mine is about as big across as my spread out palm. And if it's not very big yet, you might just want to wait another year before you harvest, because you don't want to go over harvesting and fully killing your plant. Because I'm in a raised bed right here, the soil is actually fairly loose and I can manage to pull up the entire plant in pretty much one go, as long as I'm careful and I do a little bit of wiggling. Since what we're harvesting is the root, you want to keep the roots as intact as possible. If you're a little too impatient about it, you can end up breaking off the ends of a lot of roots deeper in the soil. Next, I'm going to quickly rinse off the roots. This does not have to be perfect. This is mostly just to keep the dirt out of the way of my clippers as I'm clipping the roots apart. We'll do a much better job cleaning these once we're inside. So I'm going to come through with my clippers and clip off anything that's about pencil-sized or larger. Those are the roots that I personally find worth saving. As I do this, I'm taking care not to damage the crown of the plant, because what we want to do is we want to be able to replant this in just a minute. So as soon as you're done harvesting roots, you'll want to go ahead and immediately replant the crown. Make sure that you keep the crown level with the soil. Don't go burying it too deep or it'll have trouble coming back. So removing the whole crown and root system is a good way to do it if you can, but if you're growing in the ground, the soil might not be as loose and that might not be an option. So on my in-ground plant over here, I'm going to show you what to do if you can't reasonably get all of the roots out of the ground. Again, you're going to start by clipping back all that foliage just so you have room to work. And then again, you're going to start digging around the crown. You can see as I'm going, I am gently unearthing as many roots as I can, leaving the ones that seem buried too deep or in too dense of soil. Then I'm going to go ahead and trim off everything I've exposed and then just brush the dirt back in around the crown. Now, if you have a particularly healthy looking crown, you can attempt to separate it and create 2 plants for yourself. And while I was digging up a particularly large root, I did accidentally break apart the crown here. So instead of removing all the roots from that smaller piece of crown, I just found another spot in my garden to plant it. Now that we've got our roots, let's take them inside and wash them off really well. The next thing we're going to do is actually go ahead and prep all the roots we harvested for long-term storage. You definitely will not need your entire harvest for a single batch of marshmallows, and it's pretty easy to go ahead and process all of your roots at once so that none of them get moldy. You're just going to chop them up into small-ish pieces that will dry pretty quick. And you can either lay them out on a towel to dry, or you can put them in a dehydrator at a low temperature setting. You want to make sure that they are dry enough that they feel hard to the touch and you can't easily stick your thumbnail into them. Once you're satisfied that they're dry enough, you can go ahead and put them into a jar for long-term storage. From there, we get to start the actual process of making our marshmallows. We're going to start by making a cold infusion of the marshmallow root. And by cold, I just mean not hot like a tea, I mean room temperature water. Using a kitchen scale, weigh out 10 grams of your dried marshmallow root and then fill your jar with clean tap water. Then give it a good shake and leave it on the counter for anywhere from 8 to 24 hours. The reason that we're doing a cold infusion instead of a hot infusion like a tea is because we're trying to extract the mucilage of the marshmallow. Once the mucilage has started extracting from the plant, you'll notice that the water gets really thick and almost kind of gooey. If you noticed your fingers getting a little gooey when you were touching the fresh roots, it's the same exact thing. And this is what is going to actually give body to our marshmallows. Once your extract is ready, we can start the full process of actually making the marshmallows. I'm going to write all the measurements in the description below, so don't worry about catching those as we go through the process. For this particular recipe, we're going to be using gelatin as the thing that helps the marshmallows hold their shape. Another common variation of this that you'll see is using egg whites instead of gelatin to be the thing that helps fluff it up. But using egg whites can be a lot more temperamental, more difficult to pull off, so I think using gelatin is going to give you the most consistent results. If you're curious about learning more about the history of marshmallow and where this confection comes from and what it might have looked like when it was first being made, I'll link a fun resource down below for you to read. But basically, we don't know just a whole lot about how it would have originally been made. We don't have any good recipes from around the time that we think it started being made. And it's only thousands of years later that people actually started writing down any sort of recipe for something like this. The recipe I'm showing you today is going to create something that is very similar to what a commercial marshmallow looks like today. But if you're interested in going back and making something even more historical, that resource I've linked down below is going to do a really good job helping you through that process. So with gelatin, you have to let it bloom or rehydrate. So we're combining our gelatin and some of our marshmallow extract, and then we're going to set that aside while it blooms. The bulk of this dessert is actually going to be made of honey though. So we're going to go ahead and measure out about 12 ounces of honey. This honey is going to be simmered with the rest of your marshmallow root extract until it reaches the soft ball stage on a candy thermometer, which is between 235 and 240 degrees Fahrenheit or about 112 degrees Celsius. I'm going to recommend that you start with a much larger pot than I did. I actually moved on to a larger pot halfway through, and I honestly wish I had gone even bigger. As your honey marshmallow mixture simmers, it will bubble up a lot, and it takes a lot of constant stirring to keep that from actually just boiling over and getting everywhere. The whole process of getting it up to the correct temperature took me about 20 minutes. I want you to make sure that you're patient with this step. Making sure you reach that temperature is crucial for everything else working out properly. Once you have reached that temperature though, you can go ahead and pour it straight into the gelatin that you were leaving to bloom. Go ahead and mix that together, and then at this point you can add any flavoring that you want. Today I'm just making a basic vanilla flavor, but feel free to use your imagination here. For this next part, you will want some kind of electric mixer, whether or not it's a stand mixer or an electric hand mixer. It may be possible to do by hand, but it would take you a very long time and your arm would be very, very tired by the end. This whole process, even in an electric mixer, is going to take you 15 to 20 minutes. You can see as it continues to whip together, the color gets lighter and lighter until it's almost white. You're going to keep whipping it until soft peaks form. So you want it to be vaguely holding its shape, but not so stiff that it's going to be really hard to spread out. While that's whipping, you can go ahead and get your container ready. I'm using a 9x13 casserole dish lined with parchment paper, and most importantly, that parchment paper and the walls that are not covered with parchment paper are spread with coconut oil. This is going to go a long way in keeping this from sticking to the dish. The next step is just to leave this out on the counter to essentially dry out. It's going to take several hours. You can leave it out overnight, but you want it to get to where when you touch it with your finger, it is simply just a little bit tacky and it feels like it's fully gelled up. So at this point, your marshmallow is technically ready to eat, although in its current form, it's not useful for very much unless you're making the world's largest cup of hot chocolate. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut it up into those marshmallow-sized pieces. So as you're cutting, I really recommend using a paper towel soaked in coconut oil to wipe off your knife in between every single cut. And I know that sounds a little excessive, but it really makes a difference as far as keeping your knife from getting all gummed up and making sure that it's pretty easy to go ahead and cut through that marshmallow. Once you've cut them into whatever size you like, then we're going to put a coating on them. This is going to keep them from sticking to each other, sticking to your fingers, etc. Now you do have several options when it comes to this coating. Two of the classic ones would be either powdered sugar if you want more of that like peep feel to them with the crystallized sugar around it, or you can use arrowroot powder, which is going to give you that like just ever so slightly dusty feeling, you know, that marshmallows have on the outside. If you wanted a chocolate covered marshmallow, now would be the time to go ahead and dip it in chocolate or whatever other coating you want. Personally, I really liked the powdered sugar coating. Ever since I made these, I've been putting marshmallows in my coffee every single morning, and it feels very decadent. All right, so if you have any questions about the process, make sure to first check out the description below, and then if you still have questions, go ahead and ask them in the comments. I will be checking and doing my best to help you guys out. Thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, happy gardening!